Rockford's home for classic rock, 96.7 The Eagle. Good morning, I'm Double T. A very special guest joining me, guitar legend and former member of Genesis, Steve Hackett. Steve, how you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Terry. Nice to talk to you.
You too. And you got an autobiography, a Genesis in my bed. Now, is this something you decided on your own you wanted to do, or was it a suggestion from somebody?
Well, my wife, about 15 years ago, my wife Jo said to me, you really ought to do an autobiography. I mean, there'd been another book which was a biography, a series of interviews, but, the idea of writing a book had always appealed. Most of it was written in the last 2 years because we were so busy doing tours, and then I finally, cracked on with it, and I'm very pleased that I did. It's finally done, so this is it. It's on the table.
What was it like going back and taking a look at yourself and flash back to earlier in your career?
My wife is a writer, and she's written more than one book, and she said, you need to really be able to paint the picture of what it was like growing up in the 1950s, because she was born in the 1960s. I was born in 1950, halfway through the last century, which means, I have some memories to share with people where the world was very different. Post-war Britain was steeped in austerity, and it really, London was called the smoke, and not without good reason. I lived opposite the Battersea Power Station on Pink Floyd's "Animals" with the Flying Pig. That huge power station was belching out smoke from 4 huge smokestacks, and that was just across the water, the Thames. And that was the view from my bedroom window as a kid. So it was a very different world. There were lots of bomb sites. London was very, very heavily bombed, and Pimlico, the area that I grew up in, which was about a mile from the centre of London, where you've got the Houses of Parliament, it was still very heavily bombed. There was a new housing estate which we lived on, but the rest of it was really in a sorry state of repair. So there was still rationing in place when I grew up, and it wasn't really, I think, until about 1953 or 55 perhaps that my mother was finally able to tear up her ration book, even though she, had 2 kids. A lot of things weren't in plentiful supply, like food.
The great thing about you writing a book like this, I'm sure there's a lot of people, especially in the States, that are fans of your music that don't know about that English history. And for you to be able to share it, they might not have gotten it anywhere else. But to be able to hear it from someone like you, that really broadens the horizon of what happened back in those days. Yeah,
well, I think that London, I suspect that Hollywood always had an idea that London was bobbies riding around on bicycles and a lot of fog, and that isn't far from the truth in the 1950s. Things have moved on a bit since then, but it was like that. I mean, I remember going to somewhere in South London with my dad where they, just a street market where they were selling everything from alligators to monkeys to just about anything, and there were no controls, no restrictions on it, and it sounds like something out of King Kong, you could get away with anything in those days. And of course, my dad said to me, "Don't stick your hands in the cage with the monkey," and I do, and then I got bitten, of course. So, by when I'm 3 years old. But that's kids for you. They're always going to do what they're told not to do. And but what I'm saying is that London was very much. It was still the London of Dickens in many ways. It was very different to the swinging London that was to happen maybe 10, 12, 13 years later. Once that kicked off, the world became, or London became, a very different place. And the center of entertainment that came in, augured in on the coattails of the Beatles, shooting to the top of the charts everywhere, all over the globe, and then at the height of their fame, inviting in Indian musicians. So it seemed like everywhere became central, with London was the pivot of that. And all of this was just going on around the corner because we bordered King's Road, which was really the heart of swinging London. So things had changed enormously in that time, and I used to have to travel up that road every day to go to school, and I would see the Rolling Stones, and it was extraordinarily, it was tantalizing, feeling that the party was going on just around the corner. I was a little bit too young for that. The Stones were all maybe 5 years older. The Beatles, in some cases, were 10 years older, but they were just around the corner as well, and it was a great time to grow up with this music explosion that was right there on your doorstep. So London was a great place to be at that time.
Now, what was it about the music? Obviously, the Beatles were something special. The Stones were something special, but it had to be the right time, too. What was it about that time that blew up this music in England?
Well, I think we'd all looked to America. The time of the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley, great singers. And there was something that happened. It seemed as if, all the British acts wanted to sound American. I mean, even presenters on TV and DJs would sometimes talk with phony American accents. And it was as if, England hadn't really discovered its roots until the Beatles started mixing the idea of George Formby meets Chuck Berry as evinced on Sgt. Pepper and Revolver and the Magical Mystery Tour. And that mixture of things, once they were riding high, then suddenly they could start writing songs of compassion and significance, like She's Leaving Home and Eleanor Rigby, these kind of character portraits that were so influential for all of the British bands that wanted to break out of the blues-based stuff, even though we loved, the blues-based thing where you had all the sonic developments happening, for a guitarist, that was important for me. But at the same time I was listening to Jimi Hendrix in 1967. I was already, 2 years into listening to Segovia, and I thought, these separate schools of music, they're never going to come together, are they? And then it started to happen. You got that mixture of influences, and bands like Jethro Tull. I'm thinking of Procol Harum, King Crimson, Moody Blues, where you had this kind of pan-genre approach, lots of styles of music, all being done by the same band that sometimes sounded like orchestras. The next minute they're sounding like a folk thing or a blues thing or a jazz thing. So the barriers were breaking down, and I liked bands that were able to truly surprise us in the way that the Beatles had done. I mean, when I first heard I Am the Walrus on the radio, I had no idea who it was. I thought it sounded fascinating. And then they said afterwards, of course, and that was the Beatles. And so, that idea of music being that surprising was a kind of clarion call to all of us wannabes at that time.
I'm talking to Steve Hackett, guitar legend, former member of Genesis. His new autobiography is called A Genesis in My Bed. And then where did the music fit into your life? And where did you decide, okay, this is taking over, I need to do something with it?
Well, ever since I was tiny, my dad was able to play a number of musical instruments. And so I learnt the harmonica from him. I was trying to play that ever since I was 2. My parents luckily realized I was very serious about it, so pretty soon they were buying me a chromatic model. I was already playing that by the time I was 5, and my heroes at that time were people like Larry Adler and what have you. And then later in life, I got to meet him a couple of times at social gatherings, and I was getting tips off him in terms of, things you could do with the harmonica. So a good 10 years before I touched guitar, I really thought of myself as a mouth organ player or harmonica, and I was fascinated by the fact that he could play Rhapsody in Blue. One hand on the piano and the other one holding the harmonica.
Wow.
And he's playing a version of Rhapsody in Blue, which he used to tell the story, saying that he showed that to George Gershwin, and Gershwin said, "I like that version better than the orchestral version." Also, that's what Larry Abbott said. But I was already impressed anyway. So harmonica players, that was before guitarists, and of course you had so many great guitarists over there. And I'm not knocking the American music scene. Far from it. I mean, it's been hugely influential on all things British.
When you got into writing the book, what was the comparison to writing music? Is there any similarities at all, or is it just a completely different monster?
Well, actually, I think it is completely different, although I'd tell you what is similar, and it's frustrating. Sometimes I'll be in the shower and suddenly a great idea will come into my brain about a musical melody. Now, unless I dry myself quickly and rush out and write it down, the same thing would happen to me when I'd be thinking of something. I think, I really should include this in the book, but it's in that moment when you haven't got a pen in your hand that the muse decides to strike. So it's a bit like, I was reading about, Henry Miller was saying this, he'd try and write, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, all that stuff. Incredible American writer. And he said, he could never write when he was staring at the typewriter. Then he'd go for a walk in the park, and then it would all start to flow. And I guess it's getting to that point where, you have a flash of inspiration. You realize you've got to write that down. You've got to write down the headings of the things that you're going to talk about, these bullet points. And it's not like writing a song, because a song can be written, even something that like I'm working on at home at the moment. I'm recording it at the same time I'm writing it. So that'll happen over a period of several days, for instance. And I'll be writing that with my wife, Jo, as well. And so we assimilate all those ideas. It's like that process, but it's much longer. A book is long form. It's not like writing separate stanzas for a song where, you've got a verse, you've got a second verse, you come up with a chorus, and you might decide to repeat one of the verses, and you're repeating choruses. So how many lines are you coming up with there? 8 lines, 10 lines, 12 lines, and you've got a song. How many lines are there in a book? It's a different discipline. So you've got to be in love with the idea of writing, and I think also realizing all the time you need to dig deeper, and you need to talk about things that are first, they may be uncomfortable to talk about, but you have to go through that painful process to come out of the other side, I think, to be revealing. Otherwise, it's all flippant and just anecdotes and, hey, when I was hanging out with McCartney and Jagger, and that's fine, and I've met lots of famous people and all that, but that doesn't make a good book. You've got to know about, what motivated the writer, what really turns you on, what's it all about, what was the best of it and what was the worst of it, school days, what was the worst of it, the humiliation, the whole, you don't arrive as a fully formed anything, do you? You're a young kind of urchin. Yeah, you could go either way. You could be turned. I think I could have been turned to the dark side very easily. Luckily, I wasn't. So, but I had a few people who sort of led me astray in a Pinocchio-like manner. I had a few foxes, in my life and a few artful dodges. The shortcut, to fame and fortune, and then there's the idea of the hard graft thing. So, I think we're all a mass of conflicting impulses, and we're lucky if we come out of the other side of this thing called life sane. But I had a very good time writing the book. I was terrified I wasn't going to finish it on time, because when that deadline looms and you've rewritten the same story so many times because you didn't think it was any good the first time you wrote it. It feels like it's great, first time, and then you read it back and you say, "No, hang on, this isn't really painting the picture." So I wanted to be better. As soon as I must have rewritten it 10 times.
Somebody like you that's had so much happen with them in their career, and did you have time to reflect on that while you were living it, or was it something that when you started writing it down and going back to it, did you go, wow, this has been an amazing life?
Well, I think I always realized there was something special to do. I wouldn't say that I always realized I was special. I think that I always felt that there was potential. This is how I saw it. I didn't sort of arrive convinced that I was God's gift. I wasn't narcissistic. But I thought with patient attention to detail, I could do something that's not too bad. And I think maybe it's the English educational system, but it forces you to be modest because they're always knocking you down. They're never telling you can do something. They're always telling you you're not good enough. And I think isn't there that lovely line from it's one of Joni Mitchell's songs. I think it might be Shadow and Light from The Hissing of Summer Lawns, and she's talking about the blessings of parasites. It's those who put you down and those who've ripped you off and what have you. Sometimes they're the making of you. These negative experiences, if you come out the other side, to put certain people on the "I told you so" list. All those those people that have put you down, and the school teachers that told you that. Scoffed at guitar playing and all the rest. What did they know? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I know it's been very motivating for other people who are actors, for instance. The great English actor John Hurt talked on Actors Studio about his headmaster at school. When he was about to leave school, his headmaster said to him, "Is there anything that you think you might do when you leave school?" And he said, "I might try some acting." And his headmaster laughed and said, "You'll never be any good at it." And you could see how pained he was, that thing. But it obviously must have motivated him to prove in the face of that negative comment. Sometimes it can be very defining. So I'm sure we all have our examples of this. Or we don't survive and we go under.
I'm talking to Steve Hackett, guitar legend, former member of Genesis. His new autobiography is A Genesis in My Bed. You also have Genesis Revisited live at the Royal Albert Hall Remastered 2020. What is it about the Royal Albert Hall that is so special? Because, how many live performances have been released from there, and any incredible show is held there?
Well, it's an extraordinary theatre. You've got to realize that it was done, I guess, in the style of an opera house in the round, and it's Victorian. So Prince Albert, married to Queen Victoria, all those years ago, was a great patron of the arts, and he has the vision to have this place built. Of course, it looked magnificent, but it had very, very difficult acoustics. And I remember seeing Johnny Cash there, and his wife, June Carter, and they're playing away, and I think that was the first time I'd seen anything that wasn't an orchestra there. Worked fine with orchestras that float on into the gods, But watching that, every drum beat just went off like a gunshot, and that was a country music show. So many years later, they got the acoustics together. I mean, I remember seeing the last Cream show there when they first broke up, way back in the day, and the acoustics were extraordinary. All I could hear was the guitar. But eventually got to play there, and they have these big baffles up in the ceiling, and it's an amazing venue, and you go on that stage and you think, every great musician or singer in the world has been on this stage, and here I am, and I'm doing it under my own name, and I better be good. You know what I mean? It's an extraordinary thing, but that's why you rehearse. There's that thing, and I better come across with a certain degree of confidence. So you fake it to make it. You go on and you pretend as if it's the most natural thing in the world, standing there, and it's a huge place, and it's arguably, if not the most famous venue in the world, it's one of them, and it's a great place. I've seen lots of things there, and we happened to do it was a great evening with some special guests. It was a lot of fun. It went well. I think after the first half, I started to relax and think, hey, it's going very well. The place looks amazing. We've got lights everywhere. We're lighting up the pillars up in the gods. They're changing color, and the atmosphere is really wonderful. It was sold out, and it's been redone, remastered, put onto vinyl. So you can either listen to the CD or the vinyl. There's the live show, which was out before the DVD or Blu-ray. It's Inside Out wanted to do a version of it. They wanted to put it out again on vinyl because there's been so much interest in vinyl or re-interest in vinyl, and it'll probably be one of a series of things that we'll do on vinyl, as well as the other forms. Some people prefer CD, some people want it digitally, some people want it on album. I resisted the idea of doing anything back on cassette because I got tired of those breaking. But there'll come a day someone will come up with the idea of, hey, why don't we do a 78? And I'll be going, well, if that turns you on, it'll be my pleasure. But,
if someone will spend the money on it, what the heck, right?
That's right. We aim to please.
And it's nice to have the vinyl again because you get all the liner notes and the artwork and all that, which is great for the fans to have once again.
Well, I think, that's a big part of it, isn't it? Having something that's substantial. And I'm just staring down at a few box sets here that I'm looking at. An Alan Parsons one that on his album, I'm on that playing on the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it's huge box set that goes with it. And I've had a couple of box sets over the years, it's great to have all that. Of course, you can't encapsulate everything because it's been a long and varied career. Some albums have been rock, some have been classical, some have been acoustic. It's been a lot of different styles. It's a pan-genre approach. I get turned on by lots of different kinds of music, and I get to work with people all over the world. And it's been a great ride, and I hope it's a great ride or a great book for people. I hope it's a great story for them, even if you're not interested in music. I believe I've just heard today that at least this side of the Atlantic, it's the books are out. The hardback versions are already out, and it's number 14 in the Amazon chart over here. So apparently, that's nice to know. That it's out there. And I just drove this morning somewhere and went and signed another 500 copies of this because the first print was already run out, and they've done another bunch. So maybe the book will have legs. Maybe it will sprout wings. We don't know. Maybe it's a flash in the pan. But any form of success, it's nice when when there's a response.
It's nice to have a story like that, too, where if you're a fan of music, you'll like that story, but if you're a fan of finding out about people and their lives, you have that part of it, too. So if you're a music fan or not, either way, it's going to be entertaining.
Well, it's as much about other people in the entertainment industry, I think, as it is about me. Yeah, sure. I'm the sort of the second camera unit running around, filming all these memories, but then it's about the guys I worked with, Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Richie Havens, the Kansas guys, Steve Walsh, Phil Earhart, Randy Crawford, who basically became a huge star over here, who'd sung with the Crusaders, Street Life, and many more, Bonnie Tyler, so many people that I had the great good fortune to work with, and others that I just happened to meet and, just get to swap notes with. I generally found that the more famous the people that I met, that they were usually very gracious with their time and weren't at all competitive. So that's nice, at least in conversation, they were there.
I'm talking to Steve Hackett. Where can people find the book? Where can they find the new release and everything else that you have going on?
Well, people, if they want to get it from me, if they Google HackettSongs.com is my website. So it's HackettSongs.com, and that'll provide a link on the first page. On the home page, you'll see a link to the web store, which I share with a number of acts, including Radiohead. So people can get that, and if they want to buy direct from me, as I say, these things are selling out very, very fast, and they're into a second run on the book. So you can never say with absolute certainty that something will be in the shops or available. Sometimes there's delay. I mean, by the time I get back touring, we will certainly be selling them on the road. But we'll probably start touring around about April next year. We'll be coming back to the States to honor the commitments for the shows that were canceled, plus some extra ones that are put in on both sides of the Atlantic. And I'll be traveling to a lot of places where shows were canceled because the world was closing down around our ears, of course. So just like everyone else, I'm in lockdown here. We're just starting to come out of it in a way in England. They are introducing masks. So if you go into shops and restaurants, you have to be wearing a mask. That's going to be from the 24th, which is the official release date of the book. So it's masking up over here from that date.
It was great talking to you. Can't wait to check out the book. Steve Hackett, check out HackettSongs.com to pick up the book, the new release, and everything else. Steve, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Terry. You have a great day yourself. All the best, and to all your listeners. Thank you.
You too. Rockford's home for classic rock, 96.7 The Eagle.